Morning, Greg. How are you?
Morning, Sonia. I'm very well. We've had a bit of a pause since our last episode
We have
of the
indeed. It's
podcast.
been quite a while. I can't even work out when last we chatted, how many months ago it's been.
I think it would have been perhaps maybe October, November
Wow.
2025, I think. So, yes, hello to everyone watching.
Hello to everybody. And look, we're back here to say that we haven't dropped out. We've just had a number of changes occur in our lives, or perhaps, a bit more so in my life, which has meant that we've just had to pause, but we have well and truly not walked away from the concept
No,
of connect, listen, be with.
no. We've
No.
certainly been keeping ourselves in touch with other things that are happening in the space. So people we've mentioned before, like we noticed that the Humane Clinic and Matt Ball and his team have been doing some work in the UK recently around their just listening approach. So they're staying quite active. And as we said, we've sort of kept ourselves up to speed with things. Probably the reason for this little brief episode is over the last 6 months, we've connected in with a group of people who've established what's called Grief First
First
Aid.
aid. Yep.
So Sonia completed the training as an instructor in that only a few weeks ago, and I'm going to be doing the training in the next couple of weeks. Useful, do you think, if I say a little bit about Grief First Aid and how it connects with?
I think that might be good to explain the background behind it. I can just say I'm really excited because I think it dovetails incredibly neatly into Connect, Listen, Be With. But I think it might be good to explain where it came from. That gives it that kind of credibility as well. Yeah.
I guess for me, working in the grief and bereavement space over many years, see so many people who experience grief and loss, and going back to work or how it affects them in the workplace, often being a really difficult aspect of grief for people. So I've dabbled over the years in ideas around how to perhaps support workplaces to connect with people who are grieving in a way that's supportive. And then I think about, probably goes back 2 years ago, a couple of people, Sally Healy and Jess Williams. Jess Williams, some people might know from the establishment of Dying to Know Day and some other projects. They started some work around what they're calling Grief First Aid, which is exactly this idea of how do we provide some training or some ideas for people in workplaces where if someone's grieving in the workplace, not to provide counselling or those
No.
sorts of things. So this is where it links across to
Yeah.
Connect, Listen, Be With. It's more that having enough understanding, feeling confident enough to be able to have conversations with people in your workplace who might be grieving, and ways to be supportive or just offer an ear, someone who can be there for you, help link you to other supports, whether it be through the community, through family or friends, but at least making the workplace a more grief-friendly place for people. So I won't get too technical, but they've put a lot of work into this, which I've been part of, as well as some other people in Australia and internationally. So they did a Delphi study, which is basically looking at ideas for how the training might go, and then sending it out and asking people who have living experience as well as people who work in the field, like, are these the things that you think are important to get across, until it refined itself down into a training package. And it's really only been since the beginning of the year that that's been started to be rolled out here in Australia, and it's still gaining momentum. And really the emphasis is on, it's at this level of how do we create communities that are more compassionate and caring and understanding and provide that listening ear, that connection, And deliberately I'm thinking of Connect, Listen, Be With. It really is about connection, listening and being with people who are grieving. So it's specific to grief. But we just both felt that it was such a good addition to what we're doing at Connect, Listen, Be With, which is a much broader idea where we're talking about people feeling connection around anything that's happening in their lives, and how do we open those conversations in ways that people feel like they're not judged or being looked at strangely, but having someone who can connect and listen with them.
I think one of the things that I like about the training too, there's lots of things that I like and lots of connections to Connect, Listen, Be With. In Connect, Listen, Be With, we talk about the non-judgment, the non-fixing aspect of being able to sit and be with somebody. And grieving, I think, in our society, many people still feel that grief is something that perhaps needs to be fixed. And I think, arguably, but I think a lot of people would say, when I'm speaking with somebody who is grieving, I don't quite know what to say or do. And really, we know that you are not there to do or say anything in particular. You are there to hold space for somebody who is grieving. So there, for us, feels a really neat connection with Connect, Listen, Be With. And what we'd be keen to do is, when we deliver grief first aid to a workplace, and then down the track it'll be to communities as well, we're able to say, actually, we've got something else that we could add to this training, which will help people learn how to be even better at sitting and holding space for any kind of a conversation, and perhaps with grief first aid, particularly somebody who's grieving. But I've spoken previously about Connect, Listen, Be With, and sitting with somebody with suicidal thoughts and looking at it as a non-medical approach, where we're saying, really, your job is not to try and fix those suicidal thoughts, and equally not about necessarily referring them out, just giving somebody the space to be with the emotions that they're struggling, or their thoughts, and then to flip it over to say, of course, it's also for people who are not in distress, just people wanting to share what's going on in their lives, full stop.
Yeah, because we're even, this morning when we were talking about doing this episode, talking about older people in particular, and how it may not be that they're in distress, but the issues of being alone and maybe a bit more disconnected in life. And so it is that ability to just be able to sit with someone and share what's happening in your life, and how that can change how you're feeling about life. I think we all know that when we feel connected to other human beings,
that's a protective.
Yes.
It's a protective. And I spoke about the fact that I'd gone somewhere and there was an older person who, was in a conversation with young people, and as soon as the young people were finished, it was quite clear that they were ready to move on, whereas it was equally clear that the older person was really keen to want to talk about what was going on for them right there. And I'm saying older people, of course, there are people who are younger people who are in that situation. But I think we know that as you get older, you often have more time, perhaps, to be able to sit and hold conversations. I think we're such a busy community and country and people, or whatever you want to say, we often don't have that time. And in Connect, Listen, Be With, it's about taking the time, understanding it doesn't have to be a long period of time, but thinking about how do you have that connection with somebody in whatever time you can, that allows the person to feel like they're being held and heard and understood as best the person can understand someone else's situation.
Absolutely. And I think I'm sitting here thinking also, a reminder from the grief first aid perspective is even thinking about grief, that it's not just about grief of after someone's died.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it's understanding sometimes people can be experiencing levels of grief, maybe without even realising for themselves that it is grief. So situations where, and these are some of the things that have been happening for us as well, like, if a person needs to move house or something changes in their life, that sure, yeah, people go, yep, I'm just going to get on with my life and do things. but there can be a level of grief in there. So I think with Connect, Listen, Be With, we've always said it's about understanding that it's not always distress, but it's just that there are things going on in everyone's life. And when you get a chance to share, something I think can ease in people when that happens. So yes, I think that's important to point out too with Grief First Aid. It's not just about the death of someone or some of those more obvious forms of grief, but it's when there's a change or a shift. And I know in Grief First Aid they talk about that, even if there are changes in a workplace, things like that, and the grief that can be there.
Well, I think that's important because if we talk about Grief First Aid in a workplace, you're talking about people who are experiencing grief every day, really. And, clearly it might be about the grief because they have lost somebody who's died close to them. But if you set that to one side and think about all those other griefs, as Greg's just mentioned, there are all sorts of griefs. Yes, I'm moving house, so there is a grief involved for me. Greg, you lost a pet recently, so there was a big grief there involved for you. And so you've got a workplace filled with people who in effect are dealing with various types of griefs at any time. And wouldn't it be great if people weren't judging those or trying to fix them, and were perhaps also able to find the time to sit and connect and be with somebody else to give them that space to talk about what's happening for them at this point in time. So, and we use it for ourselves. I mean, I often call on you, and I really appreciate the fact that you were able to hold my whatever grief it is and give me that space and connect with me, and that helps me manage my grief even better. I feel like I'm being heard and connected to.
And I think, as we've talked about in previous episodes, the importance of the mutuality of that. It's both directions, that even when you're listening for someone, often what they're experiencing can, maybe relate to something that you've had happen. And so it can also feel really good for the listener, as well as the person being listened to feeling supported. It's that mutuality.
No, you're right, because that fits in with you're not doing this to somebody else.
No, that's right.
Which is not just about fixing. It's the fact that you're not going in there to do it. That mutuality plays a role because you walk off feeling like you've had this connection with another human being. And that does something, it changes something within yourself, I think. And certainly if it changes that feeling of not being alone because you've had an opportunity to be with somebody else. And I think that's a big factor in our society, with people feeling very lonely and alone. Being able to just connect with somebody else is huge.
Very much so.
So, if you feel, stay tuned. We're going to be on the same page. Obviously, we're, what we want to say is that we will be posting things on LinkedIn if you're interested. Have a look at the Grief First Aid LinkedIn page. And also Connect, Listen, Be With. We will post this on the Connect, Listen, Be With website. You're going to talk about if workplaces might be interested?
Yeah, so definitely, certainly from here on, if your workplace or you know of a workplace that might benefit from the Grief First Aid training, it's a one-day training that we can offer to people online, so that it's quite accessible.
Or in person if you wanted that.
Or we can come out and do in person. So get in touch with us through the LinkedIn page for Connect, Listen, Be With, or either of our individual LinkedIn pages on your bottom, or myself, Greg Roberts. And equally, just watch this space, because we are going to continue to do work around Connect, Listen, Be With. If someone would like us to come and do that training. Or just have a conversation about what the training's about. More than happy to do that. More than happy to get on Zoom and have a chat to you, or go out and pay a visit and talk to you a bit more about the Grief First Aid and or about Connect, Listen, Be With. So very good to reconnect with people. We have noticed, or I've noticed, that people occasionally checking out our profile on Connect, Listen, Be With on LinkedIn. So for those people, there's now something new up there. Finally.
I'm going to be a little bit better at posting some things on LinkedIn as well. So,
Good.
All right. Great to have a chat. We've been wanting to do this for a while, so I'm glad we were able to do it today. Yes.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.